I think it's just important for people to be gentle to themselves and to expect failure along the way. The poverties we live in are so deep, and any thought of, I'm going to go to my neighbors and everybody's going to come, and all of a sudden we're going to be dancing around a maypole together. I would probably just like lower the lower the bar a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, this culture work, you're even locally, you're going to find a handful of people who are really
Yeah.
who are really keen. And that's good. I mean, you
Yeah.
can just start with that. I think it's also important not to imagine that it has to look a particular way.
Yeah.
Because if it's no, 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 culture work looks like this with all this gravitas and all
Yeah.
this earnestness and then shaming people, making people wrong for not getting it versus,
Yeah.
okay, what could we do that would genuinely restore some goodwill here? What could we
Yeah.
do that would
Beautiful.
genuinely have the people in this community light up and want to keep
Mm.
going? That would create beauty in a way they could understand it. What can we do that's going to meet people where they are?
Yeah.
And at certain stages, ask more of them. That's
Mm.
absolutely a part of culture work, is burdening people with uh, obligations,
Mm.
burdening people with their own tasks, letting people know they're needed. Hey, if you don't do
Mm.
this thing may not happen. And people
Mm.
being affirmed or reminded that they have consequences.
Hello and welcome to the True Wealth podcast, where we ask the question, what does it mean to be truly wealthy in this digital age of distraction and disconnection? I'm your host, Betty Cotton Birtles, blues singer, Buddhist, mum of two, and former global shoestring adventurer turned hypnotherapist and mindset coach. I believe that by healing our past and changing our beliefs, we may achieve not only the external successes, the house, the relationship, the money, the impact, but also internal success, the ability to actually enjoy our lives, because it's the joy and happiness that makes it all worthwhile. Join me as I invite friends, colleagues, and esteemed teachers to discuss means of enhancing enjoyment in our lives, following our inspiration as individuals to create whatever it is that lights us up, so that we might radiate that energy out into the world via our businesses or our day-to-day lives, with the intention that all beings may benefit. I believe that this is where true wealth lies. Welcome to the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the True Wealth podcast with your host, me. I am Betty Cotton Birtles, and I'm delighted that you're here. Today's guest is my friend Tad Hargrave, who you may be familiar with from his Marketing for Hippies work. If you are in any way a hippie and you're trying to market a business or a thing and you want to do it in a way that feels good, and isn't coercive or manipulative, then Tad's your guy. You probably already know about him. But today's conversation is not about marketing, although it does pop up. It's more about culture making and village making. And this was the topic of the event that I went to the States for last year in November 2025. The event was Arc and Craft, and Tad hosted this event with Kimberly Ann Johnson and Stephen Jenkinson. And when I heard about it, I just absolutely had to be there, not least because of the location, which was at Ghost Ranch, just north of Santa Fe in New Mexico. And my goodness me, what an incredible place in the desert. incredible landscape. And also, this location was the home of the painter Georgia O'Keeffe, who happens to be one of my favorite painters and has been ever since I was 16. So when I heard about this opportunity, I absolutely leapt at it. So, as well as Tad, like I mentioned just now, as well as Tad's marketing work, he is very much involved in culture work and culture making and village making. And a lot of this has been inspired by his mentor, Stephen Jenkinson. And so it was such yeah, an honor and a privilege to be there with Stephen and to hear directly from him about this culture work. So previously, we've done another episode that was about culture work, and this episode today was a follow up to that. So if you haven't heard the first conversation, please do go and listen to it. It's called something like practicing culture making in an antibiotic society or something, but you'll find it if you look for Tad Hargrave. And so I was left after that conversation, which was incredibly, I mean, I just found it fascinating. I was left with some more questions. So I asked him straight away if he'd come back for another one. And this is the result of that. So, yeah, if you're wondering about what your role might be in knitting together some kind of cohesive community where people take care of each other and mark and honor certain transitions in life and get together and yeah, celebrate together, I suppose. And this kind of a whole idea of a functioning village with an intact culture is yeah, it's not something that many of us in the West are actually that familiar with. But these are my favorite kinds of conversations to be having at the moment. And I'm absolutely delighted that Tad is here for another one. So I will shut up now and allow you to enjoy this conversation with Tad Hargrave. You can find out more about Tad at marketingforhippies.com, of course, or you can also subscribe to his Substack if you go to substack.com and then he's Tad Hargrave at Tad Hargrave. All right, that's all for now. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome back to the podcast, Tad. It's lovely to have you back again for a third time.
Thank you so much. Was it the third time now?
I believe so.
Wow.
Yeah. um, yeah, no, it's definitely three. How are you doing today? It's morning for you when we're recording. It's coming to the end of my Friday. I've just told you it's absolutely crazy Welsh weather outside, and I'm lucky to have made it back here for the interview in time. So, how are you doing? How are you finding yourself this morning?
Good. I got towards the end of our shared time in New Mexico, I got pretty sick or
Mm.
a cold, and I was just pretty wiped out. And so I'm just on the other side of that. So there may still be a bit of a lingering cough, but overall feeling much better every day.
Oh, that's good to hear. And you've had an event in BC as well since then. You've been away
Yeah, I
again.
did. That's right. I did a day-long marketing workshop, which I made it through, but yeah, a little less energy than I normally have.
Mm. And you've just mentioned our time together in New Mexico. So it seems like a beautiful place to start. What an incredible gathering of beautiful people it was, and such an incredible landscape.
Mm.
How are you finding yourself after that? How long you were away? A couple of weeks, was it in the end?
Yeah, it was a beautiful time. The the idea for the event came from conversations that Kimberly and Johnson and I had. God, is it a year ago or 2 years ago? Kimberly was going over some of the projects she was wanting to help Stephen finish, and I said, the one that is missing there is one where Stephen's talking about how to do what he does, this kind of culture work piece. And so the idea was to bring together a bunch of people who do culture work already to learn. So yeah, lots of months of prep and trying to think it through. And before and after, there was some time with Steve and Natalie and fellow Dustin from the farm where we traipsed around New Mexico because yeah, Natalie and Stephen both had some time and history in that area, so they were driving us around to the places that they'd been, and there were a couple times Stephen got recognized going into a thrift shop uh, in Santa Fe called Double Take, which is an amazing thrift shop. When he walked in, the store owner was, "Is it you?" And then that happened again. We went to Chimayo. This fellow Carlito at Medina's gallery looked at him and said, "Is it you? Really?" And they embraced. And so it was beautiful to be seeing some of this history for them and to do a bit of shopping. But my God, Santa Fe is the place to go shopping if you have $500,000 and somewhere you want to decorate. Uh,
Right.
but it was yeah, it was grand. So I got to see a lot. I was in New Mexico probably 20 years ago. Or a little more. There's a United World College. It's a system of colleges connected to the UN. And for grade 11 and 12, which I got rejected from in high school, I was not accepted. My
What
friend
did
Heather
you
Gross,
say for greater 11 and 12?
grade 11 and 12.
What does that mean? Is that a thing? I have no idea.
Uh,
Might be because I'm British. I've got no idea what you're talking about.
yes, it's like the 11th grade.
Uh-huh. We don't
You
do
know,
grades either. So yeah, but I vaguely know
the,
that
the last 2 years of high school,
uh-huh. Like age 16 to 18,
something like that.
more or less. Anyway, carry on. You got rejected.
I got rejected. This is the important point,
Okay.
folks. No,
Sorry.
I wasn't accepted to this United World College. My friend Heather Gross was. It was a terrible time. But I
Oh.
got invited to go lead a facilitation training there in Las Vegas, New Mexico, different Las Vegas.
Mm.
And God, that one had come right after two absolute disasters. I started a project called Youth Jams back in 1999, and I'd presided over two events that had, I mean, around issues of race, class, gender, just exploded. Terrible. And then on the heels of that, I was invited to do a facilitation training. I said, "You got the wrong guy. This is not who you. I'm not who you want." But Naomi Swinton, my friend who was working there, she said, "No, no, but sometimes as you that really qualifies us." And I said, "Well, oh
What, by
God, sorry."
messing up, you mean?
Yeah.
So you feel like the event didn't go well?
Oh, they did. No, they didn't. I
They
mean,
didn't. Okay.
that wasn't just an opinion. That was the at one of them, the exorcism that happened was a clue, and the other one when when people left screaming at the facilitator, and I had to take all the facilitators, all of us, out of control of the event and just let the participants run it because we'd so lost trust. That was the clue on that one. Um, no,
Hang on a minute. You can't just say exorcism and then carry on. Like, can you just tell me more about that? Are we talking like
I
an actual
I wasn't there when
exorcism?
it happened.
Oh, it
No,
wasn't you.
no, I wasn't there when it happened, but there were some folks from down south who came. And I guess they felt like there was some bad juju and somebody fell under some spell and they decided there was an exorcism that needed to happen. And apparently it did. And yeah, we heard about it in the morning. So it was a wild time. Yeah.
Okay. So hang on a minute. Now I'm confused. So why are we talking about this?
Because
Carry on.
because after those events that were such disasters, I got invited to do a facilitation training
Uh-huh.
in New
In
Mexico.
New Mexico. Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
and I really didn't want to, but she did prevail upon me to just think about it. I thought, okay, well, I'll just think. And I sat down, I wrote some notes of what would I do differently. like, or how would I, knowing what I know, having failed the way I failed, how would I lead this facilitation training? And I was actually impressed with what I'd come up with. And so, uh, and excited. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I went and it was fantastic.
Mm.
Informed by the failures, uh, I went and I did the facilitation training and went really well. And I think I did it a couple times after that. So I'd always come down to, I'd fly into, Santa Fe, I think. And so I hadn't been back since. And yeah, it was wonderful. It was wonderful to be back.
And that's like 99? No, you mentioned 99. No, that's a bit later than that.
It would have been the early 2000s
Uh-huh.
that I did the United World College gigs. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so good to be back in I mean, what a place. This was my first time in the States, and like I mean, thankfully I didn't drive myself from Denver to New Mexico because I don't know how I would have done it, but I had a beautiful human being, Dylan, who gave me a ride, and I needed chaperoning. I was just so giggly about the whole experience, honestly, for it lasted about 3 days. I just would walk into a store and hear the people talking and just like burst out laughing. I was so unbelievably British, and then they just look at me. Anyway, um, yeah, but being in New Mexico is amazing. I mean, wow, the architecture in Santa Fe, and I wish I could have spent more time there.
Yeah, it's the thing I loved about Santa Fe is there's so many places where you go in the world and you kind of hit you actually can't tell what town you're in.
Right.
Like
Mm,
you could be in any town because
mm.
it's all the same shops, it's all the same chain stores. And with Santa Fe, you just know you're in Santa Fe. The architecture is so specific, in particular, all that Adobe, that look. So I love that. I was so glad they kept the really unique character of it. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and then the incredible landscape around Ghost Ranch where the event was. I mean, that was such a wonderful location to be in for a few days together. I was so grateful that that was the place, and the buildings were gorgeous. I mean, it really helped, I guess, in an event that's speaking about culture to be such a rich place.
Yeah, it wasn't hard on the eyes, that's for sure.
No, beautiful. Okay.
Although, I would say this actually. Um, I think it's a good place to learn about culture work. I don't know if it would be the best place to practice culture work,
Mm,
meaning culture work seems to occur largely as a response to the troubles, uh, of our times and in our lives. And so this was something I'd heard from Stephen years ago that it's very tempting when we're doing, I know we'll probably get to talking about what does it mean culture work, but
mm.
when we're doing some kind of culture work to just pick like what's the most beautiful resort destination we can think of? What's the most beautiful place in nature? What are the most gorgeous, beauty-filled events? But actually, where that kind of ceremony or ritual might be most needed is in the hurting places, is in the places that are ugly, that don't look so good, that are not the places you'd want to go. Those are the places that could probably use some blessings. It's the rough places in people's lives. Like the other night, here in our community, well, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but I think I've lost count of the number of couples I know right now who are good people. I mean, people who would sort of get and understand culture work and they're hip to the scene, who are deeply struggling and on the verge of their relationship exploding. And so uh, there's one fellow in this community, and anyway, there was a bit of an explosion in their relationship. And so we had a circle here, brought some of the men together to support him. And that eruption was the occasion for this. I don't know if I would even call it culture work exactly, but it was the occasion for this uh, time together. And so I think yeah, if you're going to learn about this kind of stuff, yeah, it's great to be in a beautiful place. It's just that the place as culture workers the places we're likely to find ourselves employed and called upon and leaned upon and called towards will likely not be the most beautiful places. So, if you've got it in mind that you want to spend your life just in five-star resorts,
Yeah.
culture work is probably not for you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it doesn't hurt though, does it? In the beginning when we're learning about these things. Um, but yeah, I really hear what you're saying that it's going to take and where it's needed the most. Yeah, yeah, is wherever it's needed, beautiful or not beautiful. Okay, you touched on like it's probably helpful to do a definition to define because I thought I got it and I think I get it. And then I kind of find myself going, do I really understand this? Um, and obviously we've had some back and forth um, about this. And in my role, particularly as doing hypnotic regression and healing people by looking at the wounds that are blocking, like the emotional wounds that usually occur in childhood that are stopping them from actually growing up and behaving like an adult and taking responsibility for the direction of their lives. And I found myself, so when I was thinking about coming to Art and Craft, I was sitting with, well, is this something for me? And I'm, as well as my therapeutic work that I'm doing, and I'm sure we're going to touch on therapy and culture work in a moment, but like I've been sitting with this question of, well, if I'm helping people to like release the old patterns and stories that are keeping them kind of behaving like children and all the manipulative stuff that happens when we're stuck in that way of relating with the world. And I can help them to start to, just grow up and zoom out and see the bigger picture and see that actually everyone's hurting and blah, 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 blah. And then they start to behave like adults. And then what I notice then is that they can start to interact, the relationships improve. They can stop taking everything really personally. And what I see with the people that I see, my clients, is that they have a vision. When they come to me, they have a vision for village making, usually a lot of the time. And it will vary slightly on person to person. But it seems that that they're that they're needing this kind of healing first before they go to that. And so this is why I'm asking for the definition of what culture work is, well, for me personally, coming from this therapeutic way of working, but with a real desire for it not to, and you know what I realize about, I've recently realized that what I'm doing is helping them kind of kill off the child. And what that does is like it functions like a rite of passage in a way, but it's not a proper rite of passage because it's like the poor man's version of a rite of passage, right? But it's like what we've got right now. Anyway, so what I guess the question is, yeah, this is why I'm questioning what is culture work and how does it fit then with this therapeutic way of working?
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, you and I are, I mean, what do we know? There's probably a lot of people who are more qualified and more time in on this, but just for what it's worth. So one of the things Stephen would talk about in the Orphan Wisdom School was this, called it the tripod. He said, but It's like if you look at a teepee, often they go up first with these three poles. Yeah, and they kind of lean on each other's shoulders and hold each other in place. And that makes the space for what's underneath, or a three-legged stool. You just have two and the thing topples over. So you need three to hold the thing up. And that space that they create is the space that we live in our lives. And one of those poles is, you could say, the human world. So that's all of our relationships. Yeah, with people who walk around on two legs like us. Then there's the non-human world. So these are all the plants and the animals and the insects and the water and the wind and all of that. And then third, there's the unseen. And that you don't really have, I think, a functioning culture unless all three of those are present and tended to. And I mean, briefly, before we talk about culture work, there's got to be some, sense of culture, which I think we spoke about maybe in a past conversation. But um, my dear friend Kakisimo Esqueu, who's a Métis Indigenous cultural activist, I mean, legit cultural activist from Alberta, she heard from an elder, Blackfoot elder, Narcissus Blood, if I recall correctly, culture is our set of instructions for how to live on the land in a good way. So it's culture is going to be very specific to the particular land base you're on. It's not really transportable to another place. And so it's based on a set of teachings and shared understandings that then guide your life, often conveyed in a culture through stories, not through sometimes explicit education and often through stories. Uh, but another way to look at culture is that culture is the thing, it's like in the soil, you've got the bacteria in the soil, which is, and the mycelial networks, and this is what actually makes everything work. It's these unseen forces in the soil that turn the, sugars into nutrients for this. They're what mediate the exchange between maybe the soil and the roots of a plant. And one of the principal differences between plants and humans is that the plants live in the soil, whereas mammals uh, carry the soil inside themselves. So that's what's in our gut is the soil. One of the ways you could say somebody is indigenous to a place would be that the soil in their gut matches the soil that they live on, which of course almost nobody these days would. We dodgy Chinese food from somewhere, and we travel to this place, and we import stuff, and we get on Amazon. So our guts are a bit of a mix, which not it's not the enemy of anything, but it's just that I think that is the reality. And so then you could also say that human culture is the thing that we live inside of. So we carry the soil here, but there's a kind of soil of culture that humans live in, and that there are things we can do to help build up the healthy culture in the soil around us, and there are things that we can do that kill the life in the soil around us. And so I think so much of culture work is about fostering the conditions where that kind of life can grow. Just like in your diet, you would eat things, that give you a healthy gut. There's ways we can behave that create a healthy culture. So I just think it's helpful to think of culture as a living something, not just because if it's just a series of teachings that then you can preserve them. You can formaldehyde them. They can be in a book, and then you can say, well, that's culture. But it's not, I don't think it's culture when it's preserved. It's culture when it's practiced. It's culture when it's put into motion and lived out. That's culture. And those teachings, of course, uh, in functional cultures are teachings about how do you feed the soil instead of how do you starve it or kill it. And so, but this is all most of what I'm talking about there is these teachings. There's something about how do we live as humans, but the teachings have to include how do we relate to the non-human world, and they have to include how do we relate to the unseen. So I think just all three of those have to be present. Now, but when we're talking about particularly, I suppose, the human world, I think it's not culture work if it's something we're doing alone. It may be, which I know we'll get to, like the kind of pre-culture work, proto-culture work, but I don't think it's culture work. Culture work, I think by definition means more people have to be involved, more people have to be included. But not infinitely. Not it's a global event. I don't think a global event is culture. I think it's a human scaled situation, meaning, I think up to about 150 people seems to be the magical number that, villages hit, that stay villagey, that tribes hit before they maybe outstrip their land base. Um, 150 is a number of people you can kind of remember and interact with and have those relationships with, but somewhere in there, give or take. And then it's also your so there's you could imagine a horizontal axis in space of you're extending the number of people involved in the thing. So, for example, in Ireland, when there's a wake, I mean, the door just never shuts. People coming and going all the time. The body is laid out for 3 days, and more people are invited into that dying time. And birth, of course, in other cultures. Oh my gosh, before the birth, sometimes even during the birth, and certainly after the birth, those are what you would call village making events or culture making events. They're a chance where everyone gets to show up and everyone's taking care of the mother for a good while after, making sure that, well, the mother and the father are just able to relax and enjoy, and the food is made for them, things are cleaned for them. Any of the work that needs to be done on their farm is done for them. The community takes it on, or a barn raising where we're gonna raise a barn, we're gonna build a new building, and everybody shows up. So more people involved. So that's the kind of horizontal space, but then also there's this vertical axis of time. And very popular idea, this idea of the seven generations, that you think about seven generations ahead and seven generations behind, and you're sort of in the fulcrum point in between those two. So again, not infinitely forward, not a million generations ahead and back, but the seven seems to be, yeah, a good somewhere around there, a good human number to be thinking about. So that's my loose sense. You're doing something that involves more people, that takes into consideration a longer span of time than our own personal life, that's going to feed culture. And that's going to have the culture be stronger 7 generations from now. So then, of course, there are things we can do that are so antibiotic in nature. That's literally like dropping a antibiotic powder into a jar of sauerkraut, and you still the cabbage is there, but the life of it is gone. And I think so many folk tales are full of stories of that. What happens? What are the things that can be done that kill the goodwill, that kill the trust of soil between people? So things like cheating, lying, um, retributive justice, unduly punishing people, all those things. One of the big consequences is it doesn't just screw it up for you personally, and it doesn't just screw things up within your lifetime. These things can become intergenerational feuds. These things can become, I mean, in Scotland, there's oh gosh, I'm blanking on it. There was an incident where I believe it was the McDonald's were hosting the Camerons in Glencoe. And while the McDonald's were hosting the Camerons, under the laws of hospitality, you know, the Camerons killed some of the McDonald's while they slept. The murder was not the thing. I mean, it was terrible, but that wasn't the real travesty. The travesty, it was done while they were being hosted. And hundreds of years later, you know, or however long ago it was, still to this day, that's what the place of Glencoe is remembered for. And there are people who will spit on the ground when they hear Cameron. So that what we do, it doesn't just affect us, it affects things way beyond our own personal lifetime. So I just think that's culture work. Culture work is the including of more people and more time into our considerations and doing something that we think has a chance of feeding life.
Yeah, thanks. Um, Listening to you, I'm hearing you say that there's this idea that the culture is connected to the land. And I think I heard you say it can't be transported. So, what happens then when a group of people migrate? And I know, you know, like the settlers who went to North America, or even on a smaller scale, I'm English and I'm living in Wales. It's a slightly different thing. Um, or I'm thinking also about, cities where it's just multicultural.
Yeah, well, I mean, the question of what happens is not hypothetical. I mean, just
Look outside.
here it is. You came to
Mm.
New Mexico. That's what happens.
Hmm.
You were inside the consequence of that. Largely in New Mexico, of course, the Spanish appearing, and here it's more the English appearing. So, yeah, not hypothetical. There we go. Um, but I think it's not that culture can't be transported exactly, but it's that it can't be transported intact. The transport does something to it. Just like if you were to, let's say you were coming over to North America from Ireland and you have had a sourdough strain, that's been in your family for 100 years. And so you get a damp cloth, you wrap it up and you bring it across. It's going to be a 40-day voyage. And you land in Quebec, you get off the boat, and you find yourself a little situation. Well, you find yourself some flour and some eggs and some milk, and you're going to make yourself some sourdough, and you use your sourdough starter. It's changed now because the bacteria in the air is different than it was in Ireland. It's not the same. So it will shift. I mean, the reason that Stilton cheese tastes the way it tastes is because that's the air in Stilton. This is the terroir, the taste of the place. This wine tastes like this because it's from that valley in this place. And so it has to adapt. And I think you can see a number of examples through history of ways that two cultures came in contact with similar or sometimes very different cultures, and culture survived, but the cultures were changed. They met each other in a space of
Mm.
goodwill, and you get this syncretism. You get this, in that case, you could say a kind of, but I don't think then it's a multicultural situation. It's a new culture.
Yeah.
It's a, Martin Prechtel writes about this in his book, The Unlikely Peace at Cuchamaquis, that during a natural disaster, you'd have tribes that were I mean, close. They're not like, it's not like Mayan and Cree. It was Mayan and maybe a different type of Mayan, but forced together to live together to survive it. And as they lived together over time, well, the culture from one, they had slightly different practices and they ended up mingling. And that still is living culture. But of course, I think one of the challenges of what happened in North America, number one, you have people coming over who are largely traumatized. They're not leaving because it's a good time. They're leaving because of starvation and famine and clearances and war and poverty and persecution. And number one. Number two, it's not all the old people. It's not all the elders that came over. A lot of them stayed. They couldn't make the trip or they would die during the trip. So you largely had a lot of young people showing up, traumatized young people who are now completely dislocated from their elders, from their traditions. That seems to have been the lion's share of it. who are then trying to live out their traditions in a landscape that is totally foreign to them. So, Mankan Magan, he wrote a book called 32 Words for Field. Well, those some of those words aren't going to be useful in Canada. You got to have a new world for a field that's frozen over, a field that's so big and so flat, like they don't maybe have in Ireland. So you suddenly have to, make that work differently. And then, of course, the way it was done ultimately was not the meeting of two cultures, but the appearance of the remnants of one culture on its last legs, uh, the decimation of the cultures here, and the rise of empire and civilization, which is anti-culture, which is not culture. And so that's largely what you have. There's still little remnants of things, from our ancestral cultures, like finding money in cake.
Mhm.
As a kid, that's something from the old world that we don't even know about or think about from the old world. So there's these
Mhm.
little echoes.
Mm.
But people from Ukraine, who moved to Alberta, where I'm from, it was still pierogies and kupasa and the fried onions, and there's all the food and the pisanka. You make your eggs and with that beautiful art echoes, but not. I guess in some places more or less livingness of it, but it's hard to
Yeah.
live it out isolated from your
Yeah.
fellows because you come in twos and threes or maybe in a small group
Mm.
without the elders and without a
Mm.
place that is constantly echoing back to you your stories.
Yeah.
You don't have stories where it's like, we come from that hill.
Yeah.
That hill is now thousands of miles away and across an ocean.
It's so interesting for me coming to the event in New Mexico. I was the only European. I couldn't believe it, to be the only European in this event. And there was one woman who was there from Australia. And apart from that, everyone was from the Americas, I understand, largely North America. And why am I saying this? There was a reason. Um, yeah, I don't know. I just
Well, if,
feeling
if I
that,
can,
yeah, go on.
if I can jump in is
Yeah.
one other thing you said was this multicultural thing. And I just think it's important to underline that what's called multicultural is not cultural.
No.
That's not culture. That is an expression of empire and
Yeah.
the ending of culture. It's refugees from culture
Yeah.
living in an antibiotic soup and
Mm.
trying to survive because if culture is a set of teachings about how to live on the land, okay, you got a bunch of people from all around the world, but are they living on the land
Yeah.
exactly, or are they living in a city? Is there any shared understanding or set of teachings that's guiding them all? uh, do they even have a shared language? God, walking around London, England, I mean, which I'd love. You're just lucky if you hear English some days
Yeah. Yeah.
walking around. There's so many different accents, and which is, I mean, beautiful and wonderful, and it's in the diversity. But that's a different thing than culture.
But is it not sorry, Ted, is it not that it just is a new culture then? So, like, London is a kind of culture unto itself
Well,
as a result of all the influence because life is happening. It's so alive.
I suppose another definition of culture that could be brought in here, another layer of it, again, this comes from Stephen, is that cultures, one of the hallmarks of culture is the willingness to abide by a certain set of limits.
Mm.
So there's limits of your oral memory and tradition. There's limits of it's only light outside when it's light outside. It's expensive to have those candles. You just can't have it lit all the time inside. There's limits of temperature, uh, limits of what the land can do for you, limits of the animals, and limits galore. And you get old and you die, and there's the limit of that. And that those limits inform your life with a certain kind of grief, in that you wish you could do more. You wish you could live longer. You wish these things didn't happen, but they happen. And I think real cultures are very deeply in touch with the preciousness of life, that we're here for a little while and it's not that long, and there's a willingness to accept and abide by those limits and carry all the grief that comes with all of that being so. Where civilization has the same limits, but refuses to abide by those limits and is therefore it's not informed by grief, it's informed by grievance because every limit becomes the enemy, every limit becomes the something to get over, something to thwart. So of course you see that in marketing and sales. Well, somebody says no, well, that's a limit. All we have to do is overcome that objection. We've got to get to the other side of that. Oh, a woman's not fertile? Okay, we can fix that.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than maybe attuning to this
Mm-hmm.
woman's body may actually not be biologically healthy enough to bring a healthy child into the world. There may be some reason her body isn't conceiving. Her body may have some wisdom about that. We're going to just force that through. Children that would have died in
Mm-hmm.
traditional cultures. I mean, imagine being a parent and your kid's in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, and the doctors come to you and say, look, uh, 20 years ago, your child would have died. We have the technology to save them now. There's a good chance your child will have damage to their heart or brain. We don't know yet. Their life may be profoundly curtailed. There may be some suffering, but we can save them. What do you think we should do? So much money is now spent at the beginning of life. I mean, what a hellish decision for a parent. What do you do? How do you even, what's the moral mathematics of that? And then, of course, when people are dying, are they even dying? Or is
Yeah.
everybody refusing to say the D word and admit
Yeah.
they're dying? So the limits are swarming us and we're denying them. And there's so much grievance that I'm getting old. I don't want to get old. So Botox and plastic surgery and breast implants and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're such a grievance-filled society and
Yeah.
civilization where how did we get the bum luck to be born in this world that is so against us?
Yeah.
So I think when I look at London, I see empire and civilization. I mean, I also see one of the seats of modern colonization and empire and civilization. I see concrete everywhere. I don't see people living on the land informed by the grief of the
Yeah.
limits. I
Yeah.
see people benefiting from a system that was set up informed by grievance, that there
Interesting.
are any limits at all.
Okay, on the topic of um what's the word you just used? Oh God. The oh God, sorry, my brain's just forgotten what it was. Um Conquest, the people building the cities. What was the word
Oh,
you used?
colonization.
Colonization. Thank you. I love that. I couldn't remember that. That's exactly what this question's about. So, well, I don't even know if it's a question, but what's really interesting for me is, so now we're recording this December 2025. In December 2024, I discovered Manda Scott's book about Boudica. I remember I told you at the time, and I devoured the entire series in like a few weeks. And what was amazing about it, I think, for me, and she later told me when she was on the podcast, she told me that that was the intention, was to connect British people to the pre-Roman way of being. And I just can't stop thinking about that ever since I read these books. And like, what's interesting, and I don't know how it is growing up in North America, it's different for sure. But growing up in England, I was in Southwest England, I grew up thinking, I just don't belong anywhere. I'm such a mutt. I'm such a mongrel. I've got relatives, ancestors from, personally speaking, I've got ancestors from Labrador, Canada, like Innu ancestors. I've got ancestors from Poland. I've got ancestors. Like it just seems that everyone's come from everywhere, and I think that's probably more common than people being from one place. And as a result, I just, this idea of being a person, of a people from a place was so foreign. And as well as that, I had so much shame around being English. I just had this sense like England has never done anything good for anyone, just at the same time, weirdly, as feeling like so proud of the empire somehow that all the stories we'd been told. So I just had this weird, like, what does it feel to be English? Well, kind of simultaneously proud and totally ashamed. Um, and we've invaded a lot of places, and not me, I wasn't there, but just this sense of like that's what the English are known for, and tea and London. But where am I going with this? Yeah, reading the Boudica series suddenly just awoke this other way of thinking about being from the British Isles, which is really exciting and like actually makes me feel really glad to be from here. But that culture doesn't seem like it's alive at all anymore. Um, yeah, I don't know what my question is necessarily, but I feel like you've probably got something to say. Go.
Well, it's just, I mean, you're right. I mean, those cultures are long time gone. Yeah, because the Romans come in, and then who did it to the Romans first? There's this long chain of empire and colonization. The gift that keeps on giving. This the colonizers become the colonized become the colonizers so often, getting swept up into empire. And so the culture's not there in terms of the human culture, the lived out, practiced, what do we do with these stone circles, when in the year, like that's being reconstructed. I imagine some of it faithfully, but it's not really lived. Yeah, a few hippies get together in their robes on a solstice and do something, but those people don't all live together. They don't live in that place. They see each other once a year at this or some other festivals, kind of grasping at the threads that are left over, the kind of shards of the thing. But a few thoughts. One, the the land is still there. Yeah, and that's the source of the culture is the land. All of it's still there in the land. And it's still possible to learn how to live on a piece of land in a good way together. That doesn't go away. And number two, um, I mean, Stephen's book Matrimony is all about this examination of the shards and then wondering about them. What could those mean? The shards of matrimony in this case. So you get a little piece of a vessel and you try to reimagine the whole vessel from it in a way that could be useful to the people and places that you live in. This is another thing about culture. I can't remember the name of it, but I think this was Eastern Europe, but there's certain fermented drinks, yeah. And there's a wooden stick you have, and you stir your fermented drink with that stick. And of course, the stick itself becomes kind of inoculated with that culture. And that might be passed from mother to daughter. So even as you're stirring it, now the fermentation will happen anyways from the air and the sugars and all of that, but the stick kind of supercharges it, boosts it, uh, gives it a better chance, and keeps it in that particular familial strain. And I think there are things like that. Some of the old stories, the old songs, some of the old dances, there's still the remnants of culture in them. So those can be, a beginning point. Those can be things we bring in that bring a little bit more culture there. I mean, when we're at Ark and Craft during the feast, some people stood up and sang some old songs, from the Caucasus Mountains or some of these old traditional pieces. And that can be something that is a kind of sourdough starter of culture. Not the whole thing, but uh, a kind of beginnings. It's something I love about Stephanie Mackay's work around folklore and tradition is this looking at the old stories. And the story is a shard of a much vaster culture where there's a whole web of stories which are all connected to each other. But you can look at one story, as a Kakisimo Esquello and I did with Briar Rose, is taking that one story, or Stephanie has done with dozens of stories, and just say, what would this say about the way that these people lived in the world? And how could that be translated here and now to our times in a way that would be useful to the troubles of the time of the places we are?
Mm.
And it's going to have to be different. It can't be the same because we're not living in the same situation. But I think we can get a lot of guidance guidance that has to be translated. And it's not just that there's no sin in translating it. I mean, it has to be because otherwise what you get is a kind of antique recreation dress up game where everybody dresses like their ancestors, trying to speak the language of their ancestors, working on the land using the tools of their ancestors, even though it's different land and a different place. It doesn't seem faithful to the place that you are. Um, so I mean, it's not an enviable position, but I mean, this sort of gets back to the beginning of, doing these facilitation trainings in California that became such disasters. I think so many of the early attempts at culture work are pretty much guaranteed to be disasters. They're guaranteed to not work. There's guaranteed to be a lot of failure, but the failing is not the enemy of culture. I don't think those failures are, I mean, they may have consequences, but that may be, depending how they go, antibiotic in some way. But people also inherit the willingness to try. They see that from the older generation that these people were willing to try, willing to do something different. And there's a good chance that what's done in that kind of culture work is, all willing, less antibiotic than the dominant society. It's at least an attempt at something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you can learn from those failures. You
Mm-hmm.
can say, okay, what didn't work about that? What was it about it? How did something we tried to make that was so probiotic become antibiotic? How did the thing we were doing that was supposed to bring us all together shatter us apart?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, let's learn from that. And now we can make the next attempt a little, more probiotic. And so I think there's a lot that can be learned. And I'll also say, apropos of London, is I remember talking with Kakisimo Esquello and she'd said, it's not a community for real unless you count on each other and depend on each other for your lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's that level of interdependence. And talking with just down the road, we've got our eco village here, um, OUR eco village acronym. But and I was talking with a woman, Brandy, who's running it. It's been around 30 years, had its ups and downs. And she said, "Do you think a place like this can work in the modern world?" And I just said, "Not while there's roads. I mean, physical roads where it's really easy to come and go. So it's easy for people to tourist the place, which is very costly on the place, but it's so easy for people to leave. Something's not working out, can leave. And this is one of the devastations of the modern era is one of the functions of technology is it relieves you from the dependence on other people. I mean, this goes all the way back to the wheel, where I think the oldest Proto-Indo-European word for axle is means the same as shoulder, which another way of saying is you don't need your neighbor's shoulder anymore because you got this.
Mm-hmm.
But now today you can order everything you need online, physically. You don't need another person as a therapist. You can just use ChatGPT. That's happening more and more and will only continue. Don't even need a girlfriend or boyfriend. You can use an AI chatbot for this, etc. It's like this is one of the functions. And the less we need each other,
Mm-hmm.
the less willing we are to try again, to
Yeah.
try anything.
Yeah.
Because why bother? Because it's too hard.
Mm. We've come to the time. I don't know how much time do you have? Do you have any more time, or do you want to
Yeah,
stop?
got more time. Yeah, we can
Okay,
keep.
so that's good because I've got a few questions that I wanted to get to. So just tell me when you need to stop if I don't stop. Um, Okay, so I live in a village, which when I was talking to the North Americans in, at Ark and Craft, they were like, "Oh, you live in a village." Like, village seems to mean something that it doesn't actually mean here, because a village here is a group of houses, and all those houses are connected to the internet, ordering their things, having someone deliver the things, and like, I never see my neighbors. Um, and I hate it. And we have a little village hall. And, I keep thinking I really should offer something here. Like, I want to bring everyone together. So I'm curious, like, I'd love to know what you're doing in your community, like tangible things that are bringing the people who live in an area together.
Yeah. There's a number of things. The first thing that should be said, I think when people think about culture work, or anyone who would be in a scene that would hear culture work, I think that there's this imagination. It's going to be big and profound, and boy, it's going to be ceremonial, and everybody's going to be just gussied up and in eclectic clothing from around the world. And prayers will be said and
Yeah.
muttered, and some sort of incense will be burned, and all that. But I think most culture work is going to be potlucks.
Hmm.
It's going to be
Right.
picnics. It's going to be very low threat. We're going bowling,
Yep.
it's going to be a dance.
Hmm.
Let's get together for a dance party.
Yeah.
In Edmonton, there's something called the Abundant Communities Initiative. And they had, I mean, this is a brilliant, again, I would say this is kind of proto culture work in that it's like it's setting the foundation that some kind of culture work could actually happen and be more likely. But they would go around, and I think this came from, was it James McKnight? There's a community asset mapping as this idea that so often people look at their communities and their thinking about their community is dominated by what's missing. Is this kind of scarcity mindset of like, we don't have this, we don't have this. And so then, when the government would show up, it's like, well, what are you missing? What don't you have? And so then people start to see their eyes through this lens of what they don't have, what they're missing, instead of what they have. So community asset mapping would be you go to around a community and say, what's great here? What do you have? What do you like best about your community? And people start to see it through those eyes. So they would have people who are kind of community animators, neighborhood animators, and literally you'd be in a little neighborhood. So you'd walk around and you'd knock on your neighbor's doors like, hey, we have this thing, the Abundant Communities Initiative, and we're just trying to get to know the neighbors. And we're wondering, like, is there anything you're really good at that you'd want? Like maybe you're a plumber, maybe you're a doctor, maybe you're a electrician or a painter or something like this. And we're just kind of making the assets in the community known of who's here. And yeah, what's your favorite part of this community? And it might also be like, hey, we're thinking once the trust is built, maybe a bit more, we're thinking about doing a tool share. Like if you have tools that your neighbors could borrow, like maybe you've got a lawnmower and nobody else has one, and we could share these things. So they would do that. And then one of in practical terms, one of the things they do is little street festivals. So they'd lock off the streets and they'd have a little neighborhood festival, and they'd have some music and they have games for the kids and just hockey on the streets or whatever. And I think that kind of thing is so proper. Or, yeah, hosting a little potluck where you just start to get to know people. I mean, literally get to know
Yeah.
names. And, oh, you live in that house. I've never
Yeah.
seen you before. That gets done. And then once people are known to each other, once you sort of have a sense of who people are and you start to learn the stories, then I think there's the opportunity for some deeper kinds of culture work. So all the hellos and goodbyes of life. So maybe somebody's being born,
Mm.
somebody's dying. Maybe
Mm.
there's a relationship struggle. Maybe there's just any of you can tune your ear to the troubles, and then you could say, "Hey, Jim in that house, he's going through cancer, and his
Mm.
treatment is on Friday. Maybe we can go bring him food.
Hmm.
Maybe we can get a meal train for him
Hmm.
of some good, healthy, healing foods. And hey, you're an herbalist. You want to make up some stuff." And suddenly, there's these care packages that start showing up. And Jim is like, what the?
Hmm.
I had no idea anyone
Hmm.
even noticed me
Mm.
or that I mattered that much. I mean, the other night when we had this circle for my friend who was really struggling in his relationship, even the reaching out because we had a little Facebook thread of a kind of local crew, and I'd said, okay, I'm going to host a men's event at my place. Who's in? You know, and even that, he's like, wow, I matter that much. I'm that significant to like I didn't realize I
Mm.
mattered in this way to people that they'd be willing to go through these efforts for me. Uh, when I left Edmonton, which was 5 years ago now, I didn't know how long I'd be leaving, and I've been on the West Coast for 5 years. Kakisa Moskwe, my friend, I was gonna, you know how it is, you're thinking of a move and everything's overwhelming. You don't have time to even consider much. You didn't give yourself enough time and you kick yourself for not giving yourself. Anyways, she said, are you gonna have a farewell party? I was like, I think so. She's like, you have to. As I was thinking I might host something, and she told me what I already knew, and I've told other people. She said, you can't host your own farewell. I was like, ah, fuck. And so then I wrote her an email and I said, would you be willing to host it? I
Mm.
said, and I'm asking this knowing this is a very busy time for you and that you don't really have capacity and there's nobody else I can think to ask. And anyway, I did ask as properly as I could. She said yes. And we had two events and where there were real proper goodbyes and real tears wept and memories shared. And it did something to me, which was surprising. I stood up at the end of the second one. I said, I don't, and I still don't actually understand the mechanism of it. I said, but that voice that I think we all have of kind of self-loathing and self-hatred that's in the background. Somehow I can't find it. It's not there for me right now. The unworthiness that I felt so much of my life, I can't reach it from them saying goodbye to me properly. So, um, and then when you do a proper goodbye, everybody else gets to see, oh,
Yeah.
that's how you do it. So this
Mm.
is one of the big things of culture work on why to bring more people in
Mm-hmm.
is because let's say somebody moves to the community and you're like, we're going to do a real proper welcome.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to invite all the neighbors. We're going to
Mm.
introduce them. We're going
Mm.
to bring gifts for them. Here's this beautiful Welsh whiskey. Here's a loaf of bread from the local bakery. Here's all the here's some local cheeses and all that comes with blessings like may your time here be
Mm.
long and may your health
Mm.
be, robust and may you find real love and community here, etc. You do this kind of thing. Everybody who's there, and maybe you don't get a lot of people for the first one, but
Mm.
everyone who's there says, hopefully, if you don't screw it up, but they say, wow, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
We could do that again next
Mm-hmm.
time. And people start to get the idea of what this can look like.
Mm.
Um, but I think it starts with just very low stakes, social getting together, learning about each other, and then listening, paying attention.
Yeah.
What are the opportunities for culture work uh, from real things that are happening in the real lives of real people, where
Mm.
people could be brought together to
Mm.
do something on behalf of something bigger than them.
Yeah. I love that. And I've got so many questions. And I think one thing that is kind of that I'm aware of as I'm listening is this kind of desire to connect with the people who live very close to me, who I don't know, versus deepening the relationships with, say, like around the Waldorf school where my kids go. I drive 15 minutes and people are driving in 15 to 30 minutes from all over West Wales, basically. And, we're seeing each other every day. We're doing events together because of the love of the school, because of the central pillar. This is what you're talking about. There's a thing in the middle. I don't know if you're talking about it now, but you have done previously. There's a thing that we're all here for. And, I feel kind of divided because I've only got so much time. And yeah, these people are very like-minded. There's a sense of like, oh, and I guess this is a common thing. People congregate with, well, whether you're in a city or wherever you are, you're congregating with people who are already kind of like-minded. And this must be a thing that happens in this day and age, right? And online as well. And people are choosing to spend their time with these kind of tribes that are not location based. And then you find that you don't know your neighbor. And so, yeah, I don't know what you've got to say to that. I mean, how is it for you? Like, are all the people in your area, are they like-minded? No.
No, I mean, I just think you've given a very honest testimony to the world as it is. I think we could imagine for our ancestors that your sense of belonging and community, like you weren't the center of the thing. You weren't the thing, and you weren't the pin that was holding the thing together. There was a living culture that you were a part of that probably had no exact center to it except the land and your love for your culture, your language, your tradition, your songs, but not an exact, if you take this one thing out, it all falls apart. Uh, but a living active culture, and maybe the culture itself was the center. And but in modern world, we are the center of so many communities, right? Like you said, you got your local scene, you've got your Waldorf scene, then you've got your Buddhist scene, and you've got your now this maybe this kind of Stephen Jenkinson Orphan Wisdom art and craft scene. You've got the what then there's this other scene from, and suddenly we start to look at our lives and like, oh yeah, I'm the one that overlaps all of these communities. And the most modern thing I think we could say is like, I just wish all my favorite people could meet each other from all these different
Mm-hmm.
communities,
Mm-hmm.
and bring them all together. And that's what the village would be, which I mean, amen, me too. I mean, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
outside of that desire. So, but that's the fact that we're the center of it all,
Mm.
that's one of the troubles because it's too much to carry. Um, so I just yeah, amen. I think that's where we are. And we have communities of affinity instead of communities of geography.
Yeah.
I think, of course, it's not like that wasn't there ancestrally. Maybe there were like gatherings of the medicine people. They get together and compare notes from time to time, and the shamans and there was
Mm.
trade that would
Mm-hmm.
happen. So, but I think the extent of it is that there is no shared culture anymore.
Mm.
And so everyone is trying to do, not everyone, but I think a lot of the people drawn to culture work, it's like, great. Okay, so you want to do culture work. So first thing you need for culture work is more people. Where are you going to find them? And then that's the immediate confoundment of, wait, who are the people?
Mm-hmm.
Who's my
Mm-hmm.
community that I want to do culture work?
Mm.
Oh, it's this group of people who live all around the world. Okay, I'm going to find some local version of it. Great. This local Waldorf school. We nailed it. Okay, but wait, we never see each other like at the pub, we don't see each other at the grocery store. Everybody lives in different places, so we only come together around the school. In fact, when my kids graduate, maybe I'll stick around another year because I feel sorry for them. But basically, then I'm out,
Mm-hmm.
and that's no longer my community.
Mm.
So, this is it's a having been to Waldorf myself, it's a beautiful, noble attempt at kind of culture making and village making, and it lasts at most 12 or 13 years
Right.
for the individuals involved, and then they're out.
Mm.
So, I mean, that's 12, 13 years, that's infinitely long compared to,
Yeah.
most attempts.
Uh-huh.
But it's just good to see it for what it is. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this can't be the center of everything. This is no longer an intergenerational anything.
Mm.
And I think for it to be culture work, it's got to be intergenerational.
Would you think of your time at the Waldorf School maybe as a starter, like in terms of
Yeah.
the, yeah,
Yeah. And full of, shards and remnants, learning old myths, old
yeah.
stories. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of cultural starter
Mm.
in the Waldorf education, I would say.
And and there's a trad is there like it's a living tradition in a way. I don't know if it's living, but people are practicing, and so maybe it needs. Some people would say it needs updating, but that's a different conversation. Let's not go there. But okay, I wanted to. We mentioned about I started my question talking about therapy and my
Yeah.
lens on this and where does therapy fit? And I know that from our communication before this interview, you had spoken a bit about therapy as a kind of prebiotic. Do you want
Right.
to come back to that point?
Yeah, it's so digestively, there's probiotics, there's prebiotics. So the prebiotics are the fibers. There's a special kind of fiber that helps feed, I think, and makes the probiotics work. So if you don't have those in your system, you take the probiotics, they're just not as effective. So you need a kind of precursor, the proto thing, which I feel like is connected with Stephen talks about beautifully when he says, patrimony is the precursor to matrimony. So there's the kind of the patrimonial function. This father function is the establishment of the rudiments of home, the establishment of the conditions of well-being and safety, so that the matrimonial function can be played. This mother function of the actual making of home, the bringing of new life into the world is a matrimonial function. And so I think I don't know. This is a new thought for me, but it could be that the prebiotics are sort of the patrimonial function and the probiotics are the matrimonial function. The probiotics are life and the generation of real life
Mm,
in the world, and
mm,
that's the job of the mother. That's the
mm.
job of that function. But there's something that has to give a scaffolding for this all to happen, which is you could say the patrimonial function. And so and then it's so there's prebiotics, there's probiotics, but of course there's the antibiotics too. And I think one of the things that therapy can do when it's working is it's helping people see all the ways that we're proceeding in antibiotic fashion. Um, to proceed while in an adult body like a child is to behave antibiotically. I mean, what is
Yes, yes,
totally proper for a child to
yes.
be think you're the center of the world, what's in it for me, the kind of urgent selfishness of childhood, it belongs. And that I've got my head up my ass of adolescence, that's fits. That is proper there. There's nothing wrong with an adolescent who's completely clueless that, it has no gauge on the volume of their voice. That's them. Welcome to being a teenager. And
Yeah.
so there's no, there shouldn't be any chastising of that. I mean, it's some finger wagging occasionally, but it's mostly, yeah, that's their business. That's their job. And so for traditional cultures, there would be the killing off of the childhood, particularly for young men. And I think maybe a little different
Mm,
for women whose bodies naturally uh,
hmm
kick in this change. But for young men, uh, there's got to be, okay, you are no longer a child. You will not be treated as a child,
mm,
and you will no longer act as a child. Because if you continue to do that beyond its natural life, you'll cause harm. I mean, just of course, looking at most modern politicians, you see this. You see this absolutely, or at least the male politicians, but you see this uninitiated behavior for women, in a different way, that they're still acting like children, this sort of strange narcissism uh, of a lot of modern politicians. And so that's really antibiotic. And of course, it goes beyond just childishness, but there's genuinely flagrantly toxic behavior. People are traumatized and out of that trauma behave in ways that are so destructive and painful for other people. And there's a fellow Tayayake Alfred who wrote a book called Wasaze about decolonizing. He come from the Mohawk fellow from out east. So I think it was in his book Peace, Power, and Righteousness that he was making the case for the returns to traditional forms of governance, saying we can't keep using the white man's form of governance, and expect our cultures to thrive. But after a few years, he realized that you can't take deeply traumatized, unwell people, put them into a traditional form of governance and have that work. That there's an individual healing that needs to happen as a precursor to that. It's this is something so many, I think, indigenous people have learned is, I mean, some just don't have, let's say, white people come to any of their events. There's just, you don't come to our ceremonies. And I think many others have been very clear. White people can come to these ones, but not those ones. And I imagine a big part of the reason is that the white people just don't know how to conduct themselves in the ceremony in a way that doesn't destroy the ceremony. That modern people don't know how to be amongst traditional peoples in a way that doesn't undo the people and the culture that they admire. That our presence, the way that we show up, um, is so grating and is so abrasive and selfish, I think, often. And then that has its consequence. It's like, yeah. So because maybe you would speak to the elders in ways that are unbecoming. Maybe you would touch things that you're not supposed to touch. Maybe you would um, interrupt people when you're not supposed to interrupt people. And so even just the appearance of one person like that in the midst of it becomes everything has to shift to contend with the appearance of that person. So some of this comes down to, I mean, all of it comes down to capacity. Like we don't have the capacity to live in a cultured way. Part of that capacity is we just don't know how. Nobody's ever shown us. We haven't seen it. We've never lived it out. So we actually don't know what it's like. And so the best of intentions fail us because just a lack of education. Nobody ever told us the protocol and how it's supposed to be. But second, I think we lack capacity emotionally. We don't have we're so reactive that, and reactivity is that's one of the killers of culture when we just fly off the handle, we snap at somebody, we say something we shouldn't have said, we're overly impulsive, we can't slow down. Um, this is the childishness. We can't regulate ourselves. How are you going to have any kind of culture if you immediately resort to name calling and judgment and revenge, and I'm going to punish you and I'm going to exclude you? If that's the first reflex, is
Mm.
this kind of emotional reactivity, there's culture doesn't have a chance. I mean, you can get people together all with the best intentions
Mm.
and even a good structure. And here's what we're gonna do. We're
Mm.
gonna have this eco village, right? And we're gonna
Mhm.
make this work, and we're gonna do it in a really beautiful
Mm.
cultural way. And we're gonna you can have the whole thing laid out. But
Mhm.
then Sally cheats on Johnny to sleep with Tony, and the whole thing starts to fall apart.
Mhm.
Because we're so deeply unhealed. So
Mhm.
to me, that kind of therapy work is this protoculture work. It's this prebiotic.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some people where it's like you can't come to ceremony. Like I remember, so with improv comedy, I did that for 25 years, and there'd be people who were coming to our workshops for years and not getting any better. And at a certain point, you realize it's not, they don't need to learn more of the rules of improv. Some of those people, if they tried hard enough, they could do what I would call good prov. It's good. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible. But it's good. It's good prov. It's not astonishing. It's not surprising. It's not going to delight the audience, but it's not going to screw things up. But that's as good as it gets for some people. And there were some people I looked at and I just thought, you don't need more improv comedy workshops. You need therapy.
Mm.
You need some real candid feedback about your
Mm.
vibe
Mm.
that you can then take to therapy and work through. And you also need to go traveling, live a life, get drunk, make a lot of mistakes,
Mm.
have some adventures and loosen up.
Yeah.
That it's not more teachings. And so with, yeah,
Yeah.
with culture
Right.
work, it's like, great, you've read all the books. You know that the technicalities of it, but
Yeah.
you're emotionally so clogged up.
Yeah.
This has no chance of being alive, of being living, because I think ultimately culture being a living thing, culture doesn't have a structure, really. Meaning
Yeah.
I was talking with a fellow, one of your countrymen, Bruce Perry,
Oh, yeah.
who's done a number of number of documentaries around
I know Bruce
indigenous people, and
Perry.
he's gone and
Yeah.
lived. Bruce, you know him?
I don't know him. I know of him. I've seen his TV
Okay,
shows. Yeah.
okay. And I asked him, I said, do you have a favorite of the people you lived with, or one that you kind of just really has stayed with you? He said, the one that stayed with me the most is the Congo. He said, because I couldn't see, there was no hierarchy,
Mm.
even elders and young people. It just seemed to be this living culture. And that's my sense is generally in a real functional living culture, the culture itself, it's so deeply steeped and everybody's guided by it. And it's kind of, in physics, they talk about Brownian motion, the particles move with a kind of chaotic. Now, then something might happen to the culture, and the culture does need to take a form for what, like war. Okay,
Yeah.
you are now the war chief, and that's a
Mm.
temporary state of affairs. You're in charge. But as soon as the war's done, the war bonnet comes off, goes down,
Yeah.
and they just go back to being a,
Yeah.
Joe Schmo in the village. Um, and this happened, my sense is when the, Europeans, when the settlers came to North America, we went to the indigenous people and said, take us to your leader. But in many of these tribes, there wasn't a leader. There wasn't that kind of a formal structure. There was a living culture instead. But they looked at each other and said, well, they seem to want to talk to somebody. So who's good at talking? Let's get this person. Then that person became ossified as the leader because not having a living culture that is actually responsive to the world, instead of that, we had structure instead of culture. We had
Yeah.
a structure that was fundamentally antibiotic in nature. So we get the bones of the thing, but we don't have the livingness of it. And so then that gets imposed onto these traditional cultures who are trying to contend with us. Yeah. And then, of course, we say, okay, you're the government, you're the chief, you're the um, all of these things. And so a lot of those structures and the hierarchies were imposed. And I'm not actually denigrating hierarchy. There's a beautiful understanding of what that word means, but that kind of a top-down structure of authority didn't always come indigenously from the culture, but it came from outside. So, um, yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about my own Buddhist Sangha and my teachers and the teachings and how that operates so well. And that when somebody's practicing, that will, in their unique place with their unique personality, they're doing the same or similar practices and living out the same teachings. And it just comes, everybody's so different. Everybody's personality is brought to life by not squashed, but liberated. Like they become more themselves. And I find that a beautiful comparison.
Well, and the other thing I want to say that around the therapy is, James Hillman wrote and Michael Ventura wrote a book called "We've Had 100 Years of Psychotherapy and the World's Still Getting Worse." And there is this notion that personal healing automatically becomes culture work. That if you just heal yourself enough, um, you know, culture work naturally follows, cultural flourishes. So that's what we've got to do. We all just heal ourselves. And I haven't seen that pan out. And I think there's a few reasons. One is we live under so many spells of modernity that therapy doesn't touch. That therapy is in fact an expression of many times and reinforces. So one example of this in Canada, we have this history of the residential school system, Indigenous people taken from their communities, put in these schools, beaten when they spoke their language. And of course, these things happened in Europe too, in the Highlands of
Yeah,
Scotland,
they happen in Wales
other
too.
versions, and in Wales, right, the
Mm-hmm.
Welsh Not and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So this happened in Canada, and there's a beautiful essay by a fellow Darian Thira, Thira. I think it was called Beyond the Four Waves of Colonization. but he lays out these first three waves. First you take the land, you take the culture, you do this administrative colonization. He said, but the fourth wave of colonization is actually the therapy that the indigenous people are given for the colonization they've endured. That becomes the next form of colonization, meaning, and it starts with the way it's defined, right? So residential school syndrome is the name given to the trauma these people endured. So the symptoms of residential school syndrome might be a kind of paranoia, nightmares, anxiety attacks, a certain level of emotional shutdown. There'd be certain have from having gone through that. He said, but that names the illness as what the indigenous people experienced. Like they're the ones carrying the illness. But what if residential school syndrome instead the symptoms of it were the need and desire to steal kids from their families and put them in a school? What if that was the sickness, and then what indigenous people were experiencing was a natural reaction to that sickness? And so then where does the healing need to be? Well, it needs to be with the colonizers, not the colonized. It's they need to receive the healing of what's having you feel like that's an okay thing to do, what's
Yeah.
driving that. So the looking at mental health as we are maladapted to an otherwise healthy society. I mean, that's the Krishnamurti quote, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Mm,
But this is so much of what therapy does is how do you become well adjusted to this bullshit that we live in?
mm,
And so unless the therapy is itself questioning the structures of empire that we live in, unless they're helping us see that, oh, our reactions are actually appropriate and normal, number
mm,
one, and number two, unless there's some real teachings
mm,
of around culture and what it is and what culture work might look like,
mm.
what we have is people. Another one more example of this, you would think, well, okay, but plant medicines, I mean, that's not the human world. So they're not going to be the plant medicines aren't going to be bringing in all these spells and propaganda of empire and, you
Mm.
know, shrooms. I mean, these are our old ancestral friends, our old kin, and they will remind us about how to live in a better way. So that's the way. Okay, well, number one, increasingly, those shrooms are not being picked from old growth
Mm.
forests from the land. They're being grown in factories in China.
Oh,
That's
really?
number one. Oh
Seriously?
yeah. Oh man. I mean, and all over, the
Well,
mass production of these of psilocybin. And then, there will be we're taking the extract and now we've bred this one to be way more potent. And just like weed,
mm.
a joint that used to give you a mellow buzz, just two hoots will have you flat on your ass for the rest of the night.
Yeah, right.
So this is not going to go well,
Mm-hmm.
this mass production and popularization of psilocybin and mushrooms. But number two, instead of, I saw a stand-up comedian, he's like, just talking about, you're supposed to do like 5, 10 grams of mushrooms, your mind melts down and you meet God in the woods. But instead, we're microdosing. Why? So we can be more productive at work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's so that all of these tools, whether it's healing and therapy or plant medicine, can absolutely be seconded to the purposes of empire.
Yeah, yeah.
And suddenly it's more empire.
Yeah, you stay in control.
Yeah. So so it doesn't, the plant medicine, the inner work, the healing work does not necessarily create more culture. It could foster more empire.
Mm,
And I just think this is what needs to be looked at as we go about our work is how can our work, if we understand that culture is vital. I mean, if you don't have the culture in your gut, you're dead.
mm,
You are dead in days. You
mm,
will have terrible stomach pains. It's the bacteria in your gut that is turning the proteins into amino acids. It's what's turning the carbohydrates into sugar. Without those little beings there, we're toast, we're
mm-hmm,
gone. And I think that's also true for us as humans. If we don't live in culture, we're
mm,
done.
mm,
We are so profoundly unhealthy and unwell. So if we're compelled by that and say, okay, we need more culture. Humans
Mm.
need to live
Mm.
within culture, just like the culture needs to live in our guts, just like the culture in the
Mm.
soil,
Mm.
then I think we just have to be paying attention because I mean, and then of course with therapy, what's happening now? AI therapy. I mean, really, more and more people are going to AI for coaching and therapy. They're speaking to nothing. It's a language mo learning model, and which has no somatic awareness, no intuition, no attunement, and which will feed you exactly what you want to hear. And people say, but, no, I'm telling it to be hard on me. I'm telling it to be neutral. I'm telling it, neutral what? I mean, who programmed it? Do you think it has no bias built in from the people who programmed it? And do you think you're actually capable, like, of pointing out your blind spots to ChatGPT so that
Mm.
it's going to call you out in your blind spot? By definition, they're blind spots. By definition, you can't see them. So if you're so smart that you can already tell ChatGPT, then why do you need the therapy?
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
and there's this kind of, I mean, I've been hearing it called the AI psychosis,
Mm.
where
Oh
what
God.
happens when you're on the receiving end of this constant affirmation that, boy, you're right, you're so right. Nobody's ever been as right as you.
I
Yes, Sally's a total, what a bitch she is. I mean, can you believe what she said to you? Yeah, that's right,
yeah.
ChatGPT. Johnny, what a dick. Unbelievable. You're right. He's wrong. They're wrong. The explosion of narcissism that
Yeah.
is already here and that is coming from all of this. We're
Mm-hmm.
not ready for that. So culture
Mm.
work has to be the undoing
Mm-hmm.
of all of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Beautiful. Ooh. Okay, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
And then I think we'll wrap up. But a friend of mine, after listening to our last interview, had a question, which I said I would ask you. So the question was about business and culture work. Is it even possible, like, to bring, I suppose the question is, how compatible are these things, if at all? And what elements of this kind of culture work is it helpful to even attempt to bring into, say, an online business or an online membership? And I know, I mean, I'm just thinking now out loud that when I joined your membership, you specifically said, this is not a community. I mean, you're kind of highlighting that. So, yeah, business and money making.
Right. Commerce
Mm.
versus culture work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's the relationship? I don't know. I mean, this is something I'm still confounded by in a way. I wrote a piece on Substack about coaching versus culture work, which was, exploring this in depth. The first thing that's worth saying is they are different. They're not the same beast. Culture work, so often there really isn't money involved. You know, you're hosting a potluck, you're not charging people money. You're doing a little Kaylee, a little visit. There's no price at the door. You're running a ceremony. It's not a cash exchange exactly. That doesn't mean that the people doing culture work aren't supported, sustained, gifted, but it's more of a gift economy often. I think this is the understanding is like, well, I know for some elders, you gave me tobacco, so I've got to answer the question. But there's also the understanding amongst the people that elders can't eat tobacco. So you give them some money too, you bring them some food, there's other ways you can sustain them. And so, Mark Silver, one of my colleagues, his online membership is a pay from the heart model. So it's very much a gift economy. People choose what they're going to pay. I don't do that for my membership, but I do it for my live workshops. All my retreats and day-long workshops are run on, there's a $25 deposit, pay what you can. I don't know if that's culture work exactly, but at least helps it be more accessible. It's difficult. I think one thing we can at least aim for is that our business practices are not anti-culture, that our business practices are not done in such a way that they undermine the goodwill between people, which is absolutely what happens. Uh, all the chicanery, all the manipulative, coercive tactics that don't necessarily come from the marketplace. I mean, who knows where they come from, but have absolutely been formalized in the marketplace in terms of the rules of marketing and propaganda, the work of Edward Bernays, all this. So it's and that that way of proceeding, of treating people like an object to you just they're a machine. You push their buttons. I mean, one of the videos that I'll often share in my workshops is this woman talking about proudly smiling while she says it, how to trigger automatic mindless compliance, you know? And it's all there, automatic automaton machine, that this is
Mm.
absolutely the way that modern marketing sees us, is as machines, algorithms, and just push the buttons and we respond, which is true. I mean, in that we are so predictable, but instead of speaking to our soul, instead of speaking to not just our most triggered behaviors, that's what gets spoken to and affirmed and rewarded. So there is the chance in the way that we promote our business, just in the marketing of it, that we affirm the worthiness of people. We affirm their sovereignty, which is, I don't know if it's culture work, but it's at least not undermining culture to do it in that way. And then, of course, if you make products, where do you get them? There's certainly attempts for a lot of beautiful culture work there of building relationships with your
Mm.
suppliers and the
Mm.
places that materials come from. Um, there's all of that. And then there's things that we can use our businesses to raise money for culture work or for
Yeah.
people who do culture work.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that possibility. We can sponsor events that are culture work.
Mm.
I suppose it's going to be different for if you have a restaurant, then you've got people together, you've got food. I mean, I remember a colleague of mine, Judy Wicks in Philly. She said, "I use good food to lure innocent customers into social activism." So you could do that with culture work too. You have a restaurant or cafe, use your good food to lure people into some kind of culture work, and you could invite
Mm.
people to events and do
Mm-hmm.
things where money isn't changing hands,
Mm-hmm.
where it is more of a gift thing.
Mm.
So you can do some of it, but it's there's probably a limit, I would imagine, to how amenable commerce and culture work are to each other. Because I think in a functional culture, you don't have commerce anymore. You have trade, you have exchange, you have gifting, but you don't have commerce, meaning the commodification of things. You don't have price tags on things in that way, where it's fixed and it's no the animism is gone. Things are no longer alive. They become things instead of beings. So there may just be a limit to that. And we live in a commercial society. So
Yeah.
I think most of us we're in the meantime.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'd like to live in a functional gift economy,
Yeah.
elder endorsed,
Yeah.
child centric culture, but I don't. So how do I sustain myself in the meantime as I build that? And then
Yeah.
there's commerce.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Okay. Oh, there's so much. There's a lot here, and I feel like that if I ask more, we'll end up going down a maybe it's time to bring it to a close here, and maybe you can come again. We can talk about it some more. Um, yeah, I love. There's so much here to be mulling over, and I'd really love to invite people who are listening to kind of comment and please send in your reflections on what's coming up for you as you're listening to this, or what you're doing in terms of culture work, and How is it, what efforts you're making? I'd really be curious to hear, in your local area with people who maybe you don't necessarily know or have much in common with. That would be very interesting for me personally to hear about, or what you're doing to restore the old ways a little bit. Anything that's coming up. I'd be really curious. Ted, any final thoughts before we close?
Hmm.
Nuggets of wisdom. Come on.
Right. Um,
No pressure.
I think it's just important for people to be gentle to themselves and to expect failure along the way. The poverties we live in are so deep. And any thought of, I'm going to go to my neighbors and everybody's going to come and all of a sudden we're going to be dancing around a maypole together. I would probably just like lower the lower the bar a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, this culture work, you're even locally, you're going to find a handful of people who are really
Yeah.
who are really keen. And that's good. I mean, you
Yeah.
can just start with that. I think it's also important not to imagine that it has to look a particular way.
Yeah.
Because if it's no, 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 culture work looks like this with all this gravitas and all
Yeah.
this earnestness and then shaming people, making people wrong for not getting it versus,
Yeah.
okay, what could we do that would genuinely restore some goodwill here? What could
Yeah.
we do that would
Beautiful.
genuinely have the people in this community light up and want to keep
Mm.
going? That would create beauty in a way they could understand it. What can we do that's going to meet people where they are?
Yeah.
And at certain stages, ask more of them. That's
Mm.
absolutely a part of culture work is burdening people with uh, obligations,
Mm.
burdening people with their own tasks, letting people know they're needed. Hey, if you don't do
Mm.
this thing may not happen. And people
Mm.
being affirmed or reminded that they have consequence. I mean, that's all there, but it's perhaps one of the most culture killing things we can do is trying to impose culture and shame people for not getting it, for not um, doing the culture stuff the way we think they should be doing it, for um, not dressing the way we think they should dress or looking the way we think they should look.
Right.
That kind of shaming ends up being so corrosive
Yeah.
to culture. I think it's just important for people to be gentle to themselves and to expect failure along the way. The poverties we live in are so deep. And any thought of, I'm going to go to my neighbors and everybody's going to come and all of a sudden we're going to be dancing around a maypole together. I would probably just like lower the bar a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, this culture work, you're even locally, you're going to find a handful of people who are really
Yeah.
who are really keen. And that's good. I mean, you
Yeah.
can just start with that. I think it's also important not to imagine that it has to look a particular way.
Yeah.
Because if it's no, 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 culture work looks like this with all this gravitas and all
Yeah.
this earnestness and then shaming people, making people wrong for not getting it versus,
Yeah.
okay, what could we do that would genuinely restore some goodwill here? What could
Yeah.
we do that would
Beautiful.
genuinely have the people in this community light up and want to keep
Mm.
going? That would create beauty in a way they could understand it. What can we do that's going to meet people where they are?
Yeah.
And at certain stages, ask more of them. That's
Mm.
absolutely a part of culture work is burdening people with uh, obligations,
Mm.
burdening people with their own tasks, letting people know they're needed. Hey, if you don't do
Mm.
this thing may not happen. And people
Mm.
being affirmed or reminded that they have consequence. I mean, that's all there, but it's perhaps one of the most culture killing things we can do is trying to impose culture and shame people for not getting it, for not um, doing the culture stuff the way we think they should be doing it, for not um, not dressing the way we think they should dress or looking the way we think they should look,
Right.
that kind of shaming ends up being so corrosive
Yeah.
to culture, especially when there's no shared agreement. It's
Yeah.
different if you have a shared set of norms, somebody
Yeah.
clearly knows the norm
Yeah.
and then flagrantly violates it.
Yeah.
Maybe then, but until then, it's I just think Martin Shaw, he had this beautiful formulation. They said, how did he say it? Something like the antidote to the machine is the merry, Merry, like that sense of goodwill, the joviality, that merriment.
Yes. Yes.
That's an antidote to the
Yes.
machine. Um, so bringing that spirit into it of how do we bring the merry back
Mm,
amongst us?
I love
That's
that.
as good an antidote to the machine as I've ever heard.
I love that so much. And I think, each of us has something to bring to the communal table. Whatever skills we have, we've all got something that's of value to
Eh,
the
Yeah,
community.
and if you want to be somebody who's really doing culture work, become somebody who's very attuned to seeing what the gifts that people have are.
Mm,
And instead of asking people to do something that they're just not good at, it's like, you know what?
yeah.
You're so good at this. I see how good you are at hosting. Oh
Yeah.
my God, that night, I just saw it at the
Mm,
bar. The way you were
mm,
like hosting the group of people. We got an event tonight. Could you host this? It's a big deal.
mm,
They're like, oh, I don't think I'm capable. No, I know you
mm,
are. I've
mhm,
already seen it in you. And
mm,
your sense of decoration. My God, what
yeah.
you did with your living room. We're having this event and we just need it to look beautiful. Can I just leave that with you? And your
Yeah.
food, the way you cook. Oh my God, it's with so much love. Could you make the food?
Mm,
And you start tapping people for the gifts that they have.
mm,
And then people suddenly are seeing that this gift that I have that just
mm,
has felt so personal to me and no contribution to the world at all. It's just something I'm good at. Um, Number one, I'm realizing not everybody's good at that. This seems to be
mm,
special to me.
mhm.
And I was able to do something with it that fed the
Yeah.
culture. I was able to do something with it that
Yeah.
created this positive impact.
Mm,
This is an enormous gift you can give people, but it
yeah,
takes
of
getting to
course.
know people.
Yeah.
It's coming from that place of, again, going back to earlier of if you walk around your community and you say, "Oh God, aren't the poverties here?"
Yeah.
And all of your attention is on I mean, that's good to see. That's important. Is being naive about this is
Mm,
also the ending of your culture work.
mm,
But if that's all you see is the
mm,
poverties, then well, you just be sad all the time, and it's all hopeless and or hinging on hope one way or the other. But if you can see that on one hand, all the poverties, but you can
mm,
also see, okay, there are people amongst us who are entrusted with gifts. They came with these gifts when they were born.
mm, mhm,
This is Lewis Cardinal, a Cree friend of mine. His elders told him, the reason babies come in like this when they're born is because they're bringing gifts for us to give. So if you can
mm,
be one of those people who starts to see the gifts that people come with and then employ those gifts towards the building of the architecture of culture,
mm, mhm,
then people are doing something they're good at and they feel good,
mm.
and it can be fun. I mean, this is
Mm.
also, it's just doesn't all have to be a grief ceremony.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful place to end it. I'm totally with you. And then I realized, I've recently, as you know, got into Stephen Jenkinson's work and really deep dived into reading his books and lapping it up. And I love it. And I suddenly realized he's talking so much about grief and poverty. And then I suddenly realized my work, this podcast, True Wealth, is like, but they seem to need each other. Can't have one without the other. They're both important. And yeah, Tad, thank you so much
Yeah.
for a wonderful conversation. I'm sure people will have enjoyed. And yes, if you've got comments or maybe questions, I can tempt Tad back to come and do another interview down the road sometime. Wonderful. Thanks so
Thanks.
much. Hi everyone, it's Betty again. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I really, really did. Listening back to it as I edited it, I was absolutely riveted once again for the second time round, really, really enjoying the threads that we discussed that Tad was embellishing. And excited about what might come from conversations like this, and what are already, what people are already doing. Like I said there, maybe you're doing this kind of work. Maybe you're doing, acknowledging these thresholds of life, whether it's birth work or death work or rites of passage. I'd love to hear what you're doing. So please do get in touch. I'll put all of the information in the show notes. You can find Tad at marketingforhippies.com for his marketing work. And also you can subscribe to his Substack at tadhargrave.substack.com. And that's all about where he does his culture work writings, which I would recommend. So please do check him out, follow him, subscribe. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, then please do share it with a friend. I'm so grateful for all your engagement and interaction with me and with the show. And I love hearing from you. So please do get in touch. All right, until next time, thanks for listening.